At the beginning, Martha and Jaxon were seen bargaining about Ronald, and Martha was trying to convince Jaxon to find another investor, but Jaxon was fully against it, and he asks Martha what is wrong with her, if she knows him or she has some problem with him, but Martha remains silent. She just says, "I think you should find another investor," but Jaxon angrily says, "This is not going to happen." He says, "It took a long time for me to find someone like Ronald, and he's not going anywhere. That won't happen." Mamiki sees Camo and apologizes to her for the earlier behavior, and she realizes that Camo is now a grown woman. Mamiki says she doesn't want anything to come between her and Mamiki, and then Camo also apologizes to Mamiki and says she don't need to worry about Magolide because they are just friends and he's just showing her around and nothing else, and then Thai happily hug each other. Thandiswa was captivated in a cell, and an unknown man enters the room, and Thandiswa keeps requesting to that man to help her out because she'll be killed by the people that unknown man says nothing but "I know." Leroy was calling out Mamiki and Camo as they were getting late for work, and meanwhile Mam Nomeva arrives there, and Leroy greets her and asks if she completed everything that she had to do, and Mam Nomeva says, "Yeah, it took time but it had to be done." And then Mamiki and Camo came there, and they greet her when they saw her. And seeing Mamiki and Camo, Mam Nomeva says, "Songanga has beautiful childs." And then Leroy reminds them they need to go, and 3 of them leave for work. Martha was in her hotel's restaurant, and Ronald comes there, and he tries to get close to Martha, but Martha asks him to go away from her hotel and leave the town too, because she and the mayor runs the town. So if he didn't leave the town, then she would get him arrested. And hearing that Ronald says he helped her to grow, he gave her a roof above her head, he gave her job. And instead of thanking, she's warning him. At the same time, Zakel enters the restaurant, and he notices Ronald, and they greet each other as he and Ronald were old friends. Jaxon appears there, and Ronald introduces Zakele to Jaxon and asks him to sit with them and have breakfast. Camo was talking to Magolide on the phone, and she says she'll be wearing a special dress just for Magolide, and says Mamiki and Leroy will work all night, so she would meet Magolide that time. Then she cuts off the call. Mamiki and Leroy enter with some salon accessories, and Camo says she needs to rest tonight, saying she has a back pain, and Leroy and Mamiki trust her and says she can rest and they'll handle the work. Then Camo asks for a haircut, and Mamiki agrees to give her a haircut and make her look good. Martha was in the locker room, and Ronald comes there. Then he tries to come close to Martha, and then he says, "We should have our own private celebration for the resort." And then he forcefully embraces Martha. Martha tries to move him but can't. At the same time, Leroy comes there searching for Petunia, and seeing him, Ronald walks away from there. Then Martha asks Leroy, what's he doing there? And Leroy says he was looking for Petunia as he ordered some lunch. Then Martha also walks away from there saying, "What you want me to say? I'm fine." Back to Thandiswa. That unknown man was seen talking to Ngsuta on the phone, and he says he'll watch after Thandiswa until Ngsuta comes back. Then he makes food for Thandiswa and forcefully tries to make her eat that big. Thandiswa was throwing away the food every time, and that man angrily slaps her. Thandiswa starts to seek help and strength from Nomeva and calls her out, but the man says, "No one is coming to help you." Then again tries to feed her, and suddenly sound of baby cries appears from nowhere, and that man gets panicked. Mamiki gives a haircut to Camo, and Camo say, "Sis Mamiki, you made me look like Jewel." Then Mamiki asks if Camo is sure that she don't want to hang out with Leroy and her, but Camo says she really needs to rest as she's having a bad back pain, and then Mamiki leaves from there searching for Leroy. Leroy comes to Martha's room and says what was happening and who was that man he saw, and Martha says it was Jaxon's business associate, and Leroy suggests Martha to talk to Jaxon about it. But Martha says, "You're not my therapist, so you don't need to tell me what should I do." But Leroy says he's telling this to her as a friend, but Martha shouts at him and says, "You're not my friend," and then asks him to get out of her room, and Alaroy leaves from there. That unknown man, who is probably assistant of Ngsucha, tells Thandiswa that he won't force her anymore to have food, but Ngsucha's order is to wash her for rituals, and he says he don't want any problem. The